Hey guys, this is Greg. I felt like tonight would be a good night to start the winning characteristics videos off. So, first one, I wanted to do UNFI, United Natural Foods, and go through my thought process when I pull up a chart and study it from the point of view of winning characteristics. So, first and foremost, I wanted to cover the edges or winning characteristics that I look for when I pull up a chart. And so here, if we can look here, we'll look at sometimes the stock will have a RS new high before price, which is a huge winning characteristics. Or the main ones I look for that are very noticeable is highest volume ever, highest volume in greater than 1 year, highest volume since IPO day or week, and then the highest volume since last earnings if it's not greatest in a year. And so when we pull up UNFI, we have the immediate winning characteristic labeled here as the highest volume in over a year. And so immediately when I start to see this, I put the chart on my focus list or at least one of my mainly tracked watch lists, because institutional interest in this form is highly visible, and most times you'll see some follow-on follow-through buying, because if a institution buys, this had 8.89 million shares, if they're buying a couple million shares this day or a couple 100,000, it's likely that they're not done. And, we may get runs like this out of the stock. So it's important, at least for me, when I see this, to put it on a watch list, get it ready to go, and then see how it builds out. So again, this characteristic is highly noticeable. And so when I see this, I want to go back to see the prior traded history of the stock. How does it trade when it gets anything similar to this action? And we can see it's had multiple periods of just large run-ups off of high volume. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, when something like this comes into the stock, we could get another move like that. And from this move, you got 16 to 32 at doubles, you got 24 to 41, so you're looking at 60%. And then here we have 35 from down here to 52. So maybe this thing tightens up, which it's doing right now, and runs. But point being, I know now that I've seen this winning characteristic, I know the tendencies that the stock has to run up, consolidate, run up, and then consolidate. This one's obviously a longer base, but now I'm trying to see, does this stock consolidate and run up, or consolidate and then just do nothing for a while? So with that in mind, I start going over the other parts of the chart. So we have the relative strength. Obviously, it's good to see that this slope of the RS line is super strong when it trends, meaning outperformance versus the market is really high. And so we can see that also too. This gray line in the back is the SPX, and it pretty much goes dormant when UNFI has large moves. Same here, we sell off at the SPX, large move UNFI. And so the opposite side of it is the RS line goes dormant when the market starts to trend. And so I think now what we're looking for is this kind of same deal, right? Like, we have a large gap up, a large RS line or a high slope RS line, and then while the market sells off. So what does this thing do when the market kicks back into gear? Does it sell off like it normally does, or consolidate, or will we get a strong move? And so obviously, that's when we want to be finding potential entries and managing our risk to see if this thing actually has a chance to take off when characteristics like this come in. So let's go down to the volume now, and we'll just kind of go through my thought process here. So we have the highest volume in 1 year, huge obviously, and then we have follow-on follow-through volume, another large edge that usually we want to see after this highest volume characteristic. And then we get some dry up. So that's super key, showing us that, look, institutions aren't really willing to sell stock immediately, and they're going to try to consolidate this move and hopefully accumulate shares when it starts to U-turn up and out here. And so when we look through the rest of the base, we have periods of dry up, again showing institutions don't really want to sell stock in a big way, and then we have periods of early sessions of institutional buying or pocket pivots, and so just subtle accumulation patterns. And so where if we go back throughout the rest of this base all the way back into early 2021, we have periods of large uptrends and large accumulation volume, and then dry ups. Accumulation volume, dry up, and base. So that's the characteristic of the stock, and that's nothing's different is going on right now. So what we want to see again is large accumulation coming out if this thing wants to turn up. And so now let's kind of look at how price acts around these key moving averages, and then so we can get an idea for what it's going to do right now. So when we have these large run-ups, we get this 23 EMA support or just key moving average support overall. You got a 50-day bounce, more 50-day consolidation, 65 EMA under the 50-day, which is all pretty normal stuff for a stock that's being held institutionally, right? Like this is where they're going to accumulate on weakness. And then once we break this 65 EMA, obviously character change, we get round number 30 respect at the bottom of the base. And that's key. That's just showing us someone with a large amount of shares said, there's no more selling is going to go on. I'm going to accumulate all those shares, make sure it sticks above 30, and then we'll see what price does if anyone else wants to help accumulate. So, then we get back above this KMA kind of little cluster over here, and we start to form a KMA launch pad. And so what this means is obviously demand has come to the stock in a way that institutions are starting to tightly hold and accumulate again. And so when we get this KMA respect after taking the 50-day back, the character has changed from over here. So now we're going to see if we can actually start to trend. And then boom, we get this large stick of volume on an earnings reaction. And then again, once we've seen this KMA respect in this area, we're expecting the same idea to hold over here. And another interesting point with this highest volume ever or highest high volume characteristic is the high volume close that it creates. And I've studied this pretty extensively this year because I think it's a pretty obvious way that you can get yourself into names while also managing risk pretty well. And so you have your HVC here of 46.98. We get a strong move out, and you can manage your risk either an end-of-day basis, taking the position off on a close below the HVC, or putting your stops at cost once progress is made. So you probably would have been stopped out this October 4th day if you bought this entry, but you would have had to rebuy, and you wouldn't have been stopped out since because price has never closed below this HVC. So if we zoom in here real quick, what we're looking for here is for the HVC to hold on a closing basis, because that's when institutions are going to want to make sure the bar of the day at the close is printed and holding on that high volume close. So really what we're going to look at now, once we have the characteristic, we've got our entry techniques, let's try to build conviction, right? So we know how the stock acts, we know what's going to go on. We can look at the fundamentals and the group to build some extra confidence in the name, and also we can look at the IBT IOF markets, which is luckily given to me by the Trader Lion team. So what goes on here is obviously fundamentals. We can go over to MarketSmith really quick actually and look at the fact that in December we got 416, all the way to September of this year we're going 477. So there's obviously some accumulation, and we're expecting since that earnings day that this number will probably go up just because of the clear accumulation that's came into the stock. And the future estimates have both been revised upwards, which is a good sign. Obviously the sales and EPS aren't the greatest, but we're looking forward. We're expecting these numbers to increase. No major IBD funds in, which is okay as long as we see this number starting to increase and we see price action telling us that institutions are in the name. I kind of skipped over this earlier, but 55.3 million shares in float is less than 100 million is usually a pretty good marker to say that when demand comes in, price will respond pretty well. So that's also a strong positive there for UNFI. Finally, we can look at, like I went over a little bit earlier, 97 over 197 in the grouping. There's no real leader in this group, so if a theme wants to come out of the organic food market, UNFI could be a good candidate to run it higher and be a leader. So if there's a group move, at least we will not miss it if we're focused on UNFI just based on volume clues. And then when we look at the IBT IOF market, which again, data from TraderLion, we have the IBT markets active on 50, which will be a key area for us to look at come, when price gets to that area. And then we have our options, which have been active since the gap up. So bearish or bullish, it's kind of been a mix, but the key is that we're seeing institutional flow into the stock after this earnings catalyst. So yeah, I hope that's been a good enough summary of how I start to look at winning characteristics and then how I go into kind of dissect the chart. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. I hope it's been fun. I like doing these things. They're cool. But yeah, cool. All right, thanks.